People like ANZ Bank, Union Bank, ING, Nordstrom, a whole bunch of great stories involving our technology. Things like CA service virtualization, things like CA release automation. I'm not going to talk about any of that. I'm going to talk about culture and process and organization and the other things you have to do to take yourself along this journey to DevOps. My name's Andi Mann. I'm with the Office of the CTO, and I'll be your host for the next 30 minutes. So firstly, this is what I'm going to talk about. I won't go through the agenda in too much detail, but you can see there's no product here. What I'm talking about here is how do you fundamentally change your organization? And that's what DevOps is. Make no mistake. This is a fundamental change in how you deliver software to market. This is about doing things better, doing things faster, doing things more efficiently. It's about connecting people together culturally, adding communication, integration of people. It's about changing structures, new organizational structures so that people work together better. It's about different processes, smoothing workflows, understanding your process from idea to delivery and smoothing that process so it happens faster, better, more efficiently and safer. So, I'll give you a couple ideas about where to start, but we'll talk more about that tomorrow. So let's get going. I want to talk quickly about culture. DevOps is a cultural change. It's a change in the way people work with people. And that involves attitudes and culture. So, does any of this sort of stuff sound familiar to you? Developers who spend 70% of their time waiting for systems. It's an old joke. If you see a bunch of developers hanging around playing ping pong, why do they have ping pong tables and foosball tables in Silicon Valley? They're all waiting to compile, to test, to QA, for requirements. Infrastructure owners worry about capacity. They don't have capacity to do testing. They don't have capacity to do development of new work. So development slows down while infrastructure provisions. Testers do testing on systems that just aren't realistic. And so when it gets into production, everything explodes because all you did was test on a laptop. You didn't test on 7,000 servers. Meanwhile, the line of business executive is looking at all of this and going, why am I waiting? She's sitting there in the office going, I've got this great idea and our competitors are beating us to market. What is IT doing? That's what we have to face. This is the culture of a lot of IT departments today. Unable to get past these roadblocks. They've all got their own problems and they're trying to deal with them. It's not that they're bad people. They've got structural barriers in the way. And this is what I want to talk about in terms of culture. Now, it's important to understand before we even talk about any of this, DevOps is not something you buy, right? We have DevOps solutions. But you don't buy them and have DevOps. DevOps is something you do, and you have to do it yourself. We can't do it for you. We can provide you with assistance. You can get consultants that can provide you with advice. You can work with our partners to provide you with process. Ultimately, you have to do this. But when I talk about culture, though, it's this very amorphous thing. It's a bit hand-wavy, right? The whole, this is not the IT you're looking for. Culture, dictionary definitions are not always very useful, but I think this is informative. It's about belief. It's about the customs. It's about the arts. It's about a way of working with each other. It's a way of thinking. This is really important. You don't change this overnight. You don't change the way people believe. Beliefs are built up through experiences and through stories and through ways of working with each other. When you think about behaviours, they're shaped by processes, by interactions, by communications. Collaboration is a way of changing culture. Culture is an output of these things. Culture is not an input. You don't walk into the operations centre and say, here's a new culture. Make that happen. Culture happens because of what you do. So let's talk a little bit about what DevOps means in terms of what you actually do. So DevOps is about methods for improving communication, integration, and collaboration between dev and ops. So we can start to think immediately about what you can actually do. You can start to provide ways of communicating. You can start to provide tools and methods of integrating. You can start to provide processes and capabilities for collaboration. As you create these capabilities, you start to build that culture that you're looking for. But this is not just about building another silo, right? This is not a DevOps team thing. You don't take dev and ops and then create this third thing called DevOps, because then you're just creating another silo. This is not DevOps. But a DevOps team can help. If it's a short-term thing, if it's getting knowledge, if it's a skunk works, you start to prove value, you start to prove the process, you start to build culture. You think about Apple's development environment. They had a special team which worked on the innovative, cool stuff. And everybody at Apple wanted to be on that team. DevOps can work that way. So we've seen some of our customers today and yesterday talking about this. So people like National Australia Bank, for example, have a DevOps team. They started to do that so that they could actually bring people together. And this happens in some of our organisations. Now, DevOps is also not about a bounded project, right? You don't have a case of well, up until a certain point I don't have DevOps, and then I start my DevOps project and I implement some stuff, and then at the end I've done DevOps and now I don't do DevOps anymore. That's an anti-pattern as well. That is not DevOps. But a DevOps project can help you create the cultural change that then seeps out into the organisation, because people start to understand what DevOps is. And so you might start it in a small team, you might start it with one project. Maybe it's a mobile device, maybe it's an HTML5 conversion. It could be anything that you're doing that you can bound as a project. And you do that differently. And that gives you institutional learning and starts to build up a culture of collaboration where you have these team members working together. And so they start to understand what DevOps really is. About talking to each other, about communicating and collaborating, about breaking down silos and breaking down barriers. And they can then take that to their next assignment and start to build culture. Because culture doesn't just happen. Now, culture is not about buying a new technology. And look, I work for CA Technologies. I'm one of the first people who will say, please buy our solutions. If you already have, thank you for being a customer. But you cannot buy DevOps, right? That is, again, an anti-pattern. Just by buying a technology doesn't give you DevOps. But technology can help. So think about process change. If you've got bad process, if you've got places in your process where what you do falls apart because it's not managed well, then automation tools and technology can help to encode process so it becomes smoother. You can use technology to empower developers to implement their own servers so that operations can define a known good environment in technology and let developers implement that anytime they want to smooth that flow. And then you're starting to also build up a culture of trust, because development trusts that they can deploy whenever they want to using deployment tools. Operations trusts that development's going to create an environment that is operationalized. When they create code, it doesn't explode when they put it into production, because they've used known good systems that the technology has defined. So you're not going to deploy a technology and have DevOps, but technology can help. Now, in the DevOps world, you've heard me mention a couple of anti-patterns. So this is an idea within, especially the DevOps discussion in the community, things that you do which are going to hurt you in the long run, or maybe even the short run. So we see a lot of patterns we see a lot of anti-patterns. So I'm just going to go through a few of these. Technology silos, that's an anti-pattern. Having infrastructure, dev, operations, QA, UAT, security, all as separate departments, that makes it really hard to work together. So that's an anti-pattern. Try to break them down. Continuous everything. Continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous deployment, continuous everything. This is what DevOps is about. Do it continuously. Small iterations that happen continuously, rather than one big cycle which drops and explodes everything once every 6 months. What else have we got? Systems thinking. This is about thinking of the whole system. If I'm a developer, if all I think of is my module, I don't understand the business. I don't understand what I'm contributing. I don't understand what operations needs. If I'm an operator and all I think about is monitoring the performance of this app, I don't understand the business. I don't understand what these other apps are contributing. I'm not helping my developers. So think of the whole system, from idea to delivery, and your role in that system. 2 pizza teams. If your team is too big to feed with 2 pizzas, it's too big. You need small teams that collaborate well. Now, I don't know, I can eat a whole pizza myself, but I certainly know some teams where the managers can't be fed with 2 pizzas. But, you know, this is a pattern we've got to watch for and try to get to. These are some ideals. Maybe you can't get everything first up. Design for failure. Failure will happen, especially if you're using cloud systems. And we all know, we're all in software, we're all in IT, failure happens. It's how you deal with it that matters. So you design systems that are ready to fail. And if a failure happens, the system detects it and auto-corrects. And we see technologies like Netflix's Chaos Monkey. It's a script that goes around a cloud environment, randomly turning services off, making things fail. And in actual fact, Netflix make developers put a Chaos Monkey active in their code in test so that they know that code is built to fail and built to be resilient to failure. Agile, Lean, Scrum, Kanban, Extreme. Ways of developing faster, working together more, working with the business to develop and deliver rapid deployment of small capabilities. Maybe every week, maybe even every day. If you're someone in the seminal literature, you heard Gene Kim earlier today talking about John Allspaw doing 10 deploys a day. You've got to have something like Agile or Lean to get there. Agile for infrastructure. This is an alternative code word for DevOps. So historically we've had Agile development. The roadblock was IT operations because the infrastructure was heavy and slow. Now we have virtualization and cloud and automated provisioning, and we can define infrastructure in code that automatically creates it. Wall of confusion between dev and ops. Dev doesn't know what ops are doing. Ops don't know what dev are doing. Break down the wall. Willful ignorance. I'm in operations. I'm fixing my world. I don't care what dev are doing. That's their world. I hope they do it right. I'm a developer, I'm creating great code. Here it is, it's ready to be deployed. I don't know what that means, but I don't care because that's ops' job. Willful ignorance, that doesn't fly. You've got to communicate, you've got to understand each other. Tribal knowledge. So these are the people who know stuff. These are the heroes. I think I might have heroes in here in a moment too. Heroes are bad, because you don't want people doing superhuman effort to fix a problem. You want the problem to not happen. So you've got to encode tribal knowledge, that special knowledge about your world, your environment, so anyone can do what they do. And you want to ideally put it in automation. Test-driven development. In DevOps, you want to create a test to satisfy what you want to build, and then build to satisfy the test. That means you deliver exactly what you expected to. This limits things like scope creep, it limits things like technical debt, and it makes sure you deliver what the business owners asked you to create. Empathy is a big part of the DevOps world. If you have empathy, you feel for your colleagues. So when developers say, it's really bumming me out that I can't deploy a new system because I haven't got the infrastructure, you feel that pain and you feel responsible as an operator. If you're a developer and a system blows up in the middle of the night, you feel that pain because you feel for your colleague that they have to fix that. And it was your fault in the first place because you didn't write your code to be resistant to failure. Empathy is really important when you talk about collaboration and communication and integration of these roles. And of course, collaboration and communication are absolutely critical. This is the core of DevOps. So here are some ideas to think about. These slides will be available. Roll forward is, I think, might be the last thing I talk about. There is a pattern, because you're releasing small things, then any failure that happens is going to be small. So instead of rolling back and getting rid of that work you've done, just fix it. Roll forward, which is a very different and potentially confronting idea. That also, by the way, means that developers sometimes need access to production. I'll talk about that in a moment. So, that's culture. I want to talk about people and skills, because DevOps is all about people. Now, DevOps starts with people, breaking down barriers between teams, breaking down those silos. There are new roles involved. You might have a DevOps engineer. You might pay 30% extra for them. You might just have new skills and new training. You might convert tribal knowledge into automation. You might have to focus on the business rather than the technology. I'm a geek, I own that. I love technology, but bottom line, someone pays me to do technology because it's part of a business. So as technologists, it's sometimes easy to lose sight of that. Focus on what you're doing for the business, not the technologies you're using. And build trust. You've got to build trust in each other. If you don't trust someone you're working with, you will not work with them well. You will not collaborate with them. So, here's some research we did recently, Vance and Bourne. We commissioned it, 1,400 organisations worldwide. Interesting to look at the different approaches to what organisations do to build these skills. So we look at hiring new resources. That might be necessary. You might need to train development and operations in each other's roles. This research is available at ca.com/DevOps. I'll use it again a little bit later on. But it's important to understand this is new skills. These are new roles. There could be new technologies. It could just be a case of getting people together in one room to learn the business as well. What knowledge do you need to train in? What skills do you need? Well, business strategies come first. If you're talking about systems thinking and developing and delivering for the business, you understand business process, communication, people skills. Interesting, right? This is not about technology. Yeah, programming and scripting is there, but what you really need is people skills, soft skills, because this is about people. I'm not going to go through all of these, but Forrest has some really useful information about how do you build skills for DevOps. Trust, transparency, understanding the customer vision, looking at things like adopting loosely coupled architectures so you can swap in tools that you need when you need them. Adopting customer experience data. This is a really interesting differentiator. Learn what it means to your customer for you to be doing DevOps, not just for you. Because again, it's about the business. So people, process, org structures are interesting. This is going to be hard. This is going to battle politics, empires, leaders. This is going to be hard. There are lots of different approaches to DevOps, but a lot of it's about teaming and alignment. So aligning Dev and Ops vertically with a business unit, about teaming together with Ops and Dev and QA and test and even maybe security and network and others all in one team. not in different teams. So let me show you a couple of structural ideas. This is a web-scale organisation that has this idea of loosely coupled development teams. They have squads of developers, multiple squads with a product owner in each squad. Squads are built, so each squad manages a feature of their product. The squads are collected into a tribe. The tribe owns a product line. You have multiple tribes managing and delivering multiple products. Then across that you have chapters. These are the ancillary people. These are architects, security people, capacity planners maybe, being able to work with multiple feature and function teams. And then you have these guilds of people who share common interests. I'm a web guy. I'm a network girl. You know, these are the people who work on these things together, and they get together occasionally to share knowledge and skills. Does this look anything like your current org structure? Probably not. But this is very effective for them. This is the idea of the network-connected team. Then you have another web scale. The ops organisation works as an overlay for this people, by the way. So they're not dev and ops in one team. Dev and ops are separate, but they collaborate neatly. There's another company. There's a gaming company. Look at these different org structures, right? So the CEO, the founder, is sort of the leader, and then everyone works for one manager. Or, depending on who you ask, all of the developers own the head writer, who is one of the founders. This is about empowering employees. In the bottom left there, you'll see developers all connected to each other. A little bit messier, the developers all connected to everyone. Or the developers all connected to everyone, but there's a noob who just joined the team and doesn't really know what they're doing. And so they're sort of out separate. Empower your team. Self-guiding teams are an interesting concept within the DevOps movement. And again, this is very confronting. Who here lets their developers develop what they think they should develop? I'm going to say not a lot of you. But in the DevOps world, you need to trust and empower, because you're assuming development know what the business needs, because they're working directly with business owners. And at that point, because you've built the culture of trust, you can build an org chart that reflects that trust. In a different organisation, this is a banking organisation, you might have this DevOps team. You might have two separate teams that do work together. You can maintain some of your traditional org structures. I'm not saying you have to blow up everything. But get them working together. Apply tools that help them work together. Help them co-locate into the same building to work together. Or maybe for some of you, the same continent. Or you can have a federated model. In large organisations, it's hard to have one team. So you have representatives from each department forming one virtual team. This is very similar to the old school style of matrix reporting, except it's sort of inverted. The people come together and they form their own self-enabling team, then they go back to their individual groups and work together. And I'm not talking once every 3 months here. I'm talking once a week, once a day. These people get together and communicate and collaborate and integrate as a team. So you've also got to change process. People, technologies, organisations, and process. Now, DevOps actually requires pretty fundamental change to process. We're used to waterfall stuff, right? But you've got to change that. You've got to collaborate, improve handoffs. Handoffs are where gaps happen, gaps are where errors happen, and slowdowns, and people forget stuff. Remove those constraints. What holds you back? Identify what, from idea to delivery, slows you down. Fix that in your process. Improve that flow of code, and then create feedback loops so that nothing gets left behind and every suggestion gets included and every problem gets fixed. Now, what is the most important approach to DevOps? Automation's up there, but I promised I wouldn't talk much about tools. But look at this, agile development. service virtualization, continuous release, accelerated testing, process changes. These are changes in the way you do things. This is not what you do or how you do it. This is not what you do or what you use. This is how you do it. This is process. So agile development. I think a lot of us are on board with agile development. You deliver real requirements because it's closer to the business, and you do it faster because you're iterating quickly. Consider bringing operations into that Scrum. Consider bringing network into there. Security, QA, testing. Agile's not just for developers. Bring everyone into the team. You can do a stepping stone approach, so you can do the waterfall, and then in development you do agile. Maybe development and operations are both agile. This is a stepping stone. Some people call this agile fall. I joke that this is more like agile fail. It's not where you want to end up, but maybe it's a way you get there. You want to do continuous release. I mentioned before, continuous everything. So you want to do continuous release. That's going to require automation to pick up from your commit repository, understand configuration, provisioning requirements, execute that, drop new code in. Whether you're moving it from dev to test, from test to QA, from QA to prod, automate that process so you smooth it out and remove the gaps. Accelerate application testing. So the typical process is I finish coding, I start testing. That's a DevOps anti-pattern. Test always. Test as you code. Now, one of the big constraints there, of course, is that you need to get access to all these resources to do testing. And the typical refrain is, well, I can't test anything until I can test everything. So, again, maybe technology plays a part there. Accelerating that process by using something like a service virtualization process to simulate those environments so you can continually test. So your process goes from waterfall, develop, test, QA to develop, test, QA, develop, test, QA, develop, test, QA, develop, test, QA. And in actual fact, because you've got release automation, you're actually committing into production at every one of those iterations as well, without those constraints of infrastructure. You really need to foster collaboration. And this is at the core of DevOps. And again, it's sort of hand-wavy to say foster collaboration. It's about how do you do it. Here are some ideas, right? These are from customers that I've visited who have done stuff. Familiarization routines, exercises. Get out, play paintball with each other. Not dev versus ops, please. LAN games, board games, games of tennis, go play basketball, whatever you like to do. Get people to be with each other. Co-location, FaceTime. It's hard to beat. Aligning people in the local geo, right? Especially for large organizations. It's hard to do DevOps because you've got geos involved. Different regions, right? Europe doesn't do it the same way as Japan. So align the Japanese business with developers and operations in Japan. Secondment. Second operations into development. Throw them into the fire, and vice versa. Put developers on shift so they really know and understand each other's worlds and build that empathy. And host events, have a pizza Friday, where people get up and talk about what their job is, or they share their problems, or, this is not rocket science. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's not complex. It's about people working with people. In Valve, the gaming company, collaborative teaming is dynamic and self-directed. Individuals think up a game and they want to work together on a game, so they go around and talk to each other and go, will you work on my game? Will you work on my game? Will you work on my game? Fantastic. Let's all work on a game. And then they roll their desks together. I'm not saying you're going to be able to do that, but that's the sort of agility that you want to try and get to. At Citrix, they've redesigned their environment. So they've got common workspaces. They've got workspaces for people to work together around the windows of the building, because that's the fun and the nice place to be with all the light. And if you want to work in an office, you can, but you go into the middle of the building. They've got pool room, they've got places where people can hang out and talk. The place where I went to, they had, each table was a whiteboard. You could use whiteboard markers on the tables in the cafe and share ideas with each other. You had different styles of hang spaces for 2 people, for 4 people, for 8 people, for 16 people, for telecommuting people. Your internal support so that you don't have to log a trouble ticket. And shared space requires some privacy. So they've actually instituted ways to provide privacy with lockers for your personal stuff. So that's one idea. CenturyLink does a similar thing. Team rooms, organised by function, collaboration, an open lunchroom. No one eats at their desk, but there's an open room where everyone can have lunch together. These are just some ways to, because you'll have to probably change your space as well as your organisation. So, there are some ideas. Where do you go from here? Well, you can start by thinking about, improving education, communication, cross-skilling, evaluate those new processes, think about your service delivery cycle from idea to delivery, look at evaluating new technology to implement process which helps you drive cultural change. Try it. Just try it. Do it in a skunkworks, do it in a new project, do it on your mobile team. Give it a shot, because it's going to be successful. I've seen it so many times. This is a phenomenal new way of working. But remember, start with your goals in mind, look at your business needs, and then start to move forward. Thank you very much for your time. Enjoy CA World.